All right, so get ready because today we are dining into starting a business in Thailand. You sent over a ton of articles and resources, and let me tell you, the potential here is seriously making me rethink this whole 9 to 5 thing.
It's definitely alluring, no doubt. And the sources paint a very compelling picture.
Oh, yeah.
Thailand's economy projected to grow at a steady 3% by 2028,
Wow.
driven largely by exports and agriculture. But what's even more fascinating is Thailand's strategic location. Think of it as the heart of Southeast Asia, a prime spot for reaching a market that's just exploding.
That's what really stood out to me, too. I mean, the Asian market is massive and only getting bigger, so Thailand is basically like the VIP entrance.
Exactly. And they've really been pushing to attract foreign businesses, especially in things like tech and tourism. But here's where it gets real. The Foreign Business Act, or FBA. It lays down the ground rules for foreign ownership.
Yeah, the FBA popped up a lot in the articles, and honestly, it sounded a bit intimidating. So break it down for us. Can foreigners actually OWN businesses in Thailand, or is it all just a facade?
They absolutely can, but with some caveats. The FBA outlines restricted sectors, places where foreign ownership is limited or even prohibited. This includes things like agriculture, fishing, and some types of services.
Oh, so they're protective of some of their industries.
Yeah, think of it as a balancing act.
Right.
Thailand wants foreign investment, but they also want to protect certain industries for their own citizens.
Makes sense. But one article mentioned this loophole where a foreign company can set up a branch office or a representative office in Thailand without being legally tied to the parent company back home. What's the deal with that?
It's a fantastic point. It's like testing the waters before diving in. These branch or rep offices can operate independently, which can be a great strategy for testing the market before going all in.
Oh, okay.
Plus, it can potentially sidestep some of the restrictions in the FBA, although it does come with its own regulations.
Okay, so let's say you've done your homework, you've got a great business idea, and you're ready to go for it. What are the different company structures in Thailand?
Well, the research you provided highlights three main options: limited partnership, private limited company, and public limited company. Limited partnerships are generally for specific projects, while public limited companies involve going public on the stock exchange. But for most foreign investors, the private limited company seems to be the best choice.
Why is that? What makes the private limited company so popular with foreign investors?
It offers a good balance of liability protection, flexibility, and a relatively straightforward setup process. Plus, you only need a minimum of 3 shareholders to get started.
Oh, wow.
So it's ideal for smaller ventures.
All right, so let's say we go the private limited company route. What's the actual process like? Is it tons of paperwork and endless bureaucracy, or is it more streamlined than we might think?
It actually seems pretty straightforward. You have 5 main stages: reserving your company name, drafting and submitting your memorandum of association, holding an inaugural meeting of shareholders, submitting your registration application, and finally, registering for taxes.
Simple enough on paper. But one thing that kept coming up in the articles was seek legal advice. Apparently, a lot of the forms are in Thai, and navigating the legal system can be a bit of a minefield without local help.
Absolutely. That's where a good lawyer who specializes in Thai business law is really worth it. They can help with the paperwork, making sure you're meeting all the requirements, and frankly, save you from headaches later on. Think of it as an investment, not an expense.
Okay, so we've got the company structure down. But what about actually getting ourselves over there? What's the visa situation like for foreign entrepreneurs in Thailand?
That's where the Smart Visa S comes in. It's designed specifically for entrepreneurs, investors, and highly skilled professionals, and it's essentially a fast track to living and working in Thailand.
I've heard of these smart visas, but to be honest, it sounded a little too good to be true. What are the actual benefits? Is it really that good?
It seems like it. It's valid for up to 2 years, with the possibility of extensions, and you don't need a separate work permit. You only have to register with immigration once a year, and you get perks like fast-track service at the airport, and you can bring your family with you.
Wow, they thought of everything. That's a huge plus for someone looking to relocate their business and their life to Thailand. But let's face it, all this must come with a price tag. What kind of costs are we talking about?
Well, the initial company registration fees seem pretty reasonable, between 80,000 and 100,000 baht. But as we discussed, legal advice is important, and that can cost anywhere from 1,500 to 7,000 USD, depending on how complex the setup is.
And there are probably some hidden fees lurking in the fine print. What else should we factor in?
You're right, there are always those miscellaneous expenses. Translation fees are a big one. Those can range from 800 to 1,500 PHB per page, and the paperwork can really pile up. Then you have things like office space and utilities, which can vary a lot depending on location and size. Expect to pay around 300 to 2,000 USD per month for that. And of course, you'll need to open a company bank account.
So not exactly a shoestring budget, but hey, no risk, no reward.
Yeah,
Speaking of risk, the research didn't sugarcoat the potential downsides. It's not all sunshine and beaches, right?
definitely not. One thing that came up a lot in the articles is the bureaucracy. Thailand's regulatory environment can be complex and slow-moving, so patience and local expertise are key.
And even if you get through the red tape, there's the challenge of actually making money. One article pointed out that Thailand's a very price-sensitive market, so maintaining healthy margins could be tough.
Yeah, that's a crucial point. You can't just import a business model that works elsewhere and expect it to thrive in Thailand. You need to adapt to the local market, really understand consumer preferences, and find ways to stand out in a competitive landscape.
And let's not forget the elephant in the room, political instability. Thailand's had its share of political ups and downs,
Yeah,
and that can create uncertainty for businesses.
absolutely. Staying informed and managing risk is key. Having strong local partners can also be invaluable. They can help you navigate the political landscape and maybe even anticipate any potential challenges.
So it sounds like starting a business in Thailand is a little bit of a roller coaster, exciting highs and some lows. What are some key takeaways you think people should get from this part of our deep dive?
Well, it's definitely a mixed bag. On one hand, Thailand offers a unique blend of economic opportunity and an attractive lifestyle. But it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. Success there requires careful planning, adaptability, and a willingness to embrace a foreign business environment.
So it's about more than just having a great idea, right?
Yeah.
You need to be able to adapt, build relationships, and really understand the Thai market.
Precisely. Think of this deep dive as like building a foundation.
Yeah.
Before making any decisions, you'd want to do more in-depth research on specific industries, regulations, and the market.
Okay, so for anyone still feeling that entrepreneurial itch, what should they be asking themselves before taking the leap?
Well, what unique skills, products, or services could you bring to Thailand?
Hmm.
What competitive advantages would allow you to thrive in a price-sensitive environment? And maybe most importantly, what additional research would really empower you to make a well-informed decision?
Great questions to think about. But for now, we're going to switch gears and talk about a potential deal breaker for some land and property ownership in Thailand. Because it turns out foreigners face some restrictions in this area. Stick with us to find out how to handle this tricky situation.
Welcome back. Before we jump into this next layer of stuff, it's worth saying again that Thailand really does offer a really cool mix of economic opportunity and an attractive lifestyle. However, as we've been learning, it's important to be realistic. And that brings us to a topic that could be a deciding factor for some land and property ownership.
Yeah, this is where it gets a little tricky for foreigners, right?
Hmm.
We talked about the fact that people who aren't Thai citizens can't just go and buy land in Thailand. So for those dreamers picturing their own villa on the beach or a big factory, what are their options? Can you even have a building for your business?
Definitely, there are ways to make that happen. One common way is long-term land leases. These can give you secure rights to use the land for a long time, typically up to 30 years, with a chance to renew. So while you don't technically own the land, you would have a legal framework to run your business there.
That makes sense. A 30-year lease gives you a good amount of time to build and grow your business. But what if renting just isn't enough? Are there any other ways to get around this land ownership restriction?
There are a couple of other things to consider, each with its own pros and cons. One way is to form a Thai limited liability company, but there's a catch. Thai citizens have to hold the majority ownership, at least 51%. This structure lets the company buy land, but it means sharing control with local partners.
Yeah, so it's a compromise. You get the land, but you have to involve Thai majority shareholders. That definitely makes things a bit more complex. What about those lease with option to buy agreements? Are those even a real possibility in Thailand?
They can be, but the articles really stress the importance of getting the legal stuff right. This isn't something you can just do with a handshake. You definitely need a lawyer who knows Thai property law really well to create an agreement that protects you.
So not something to try on your own. Sounds like having the right lawyer is super important every step of the way. Now, one article mentioned industrial zones. Could those be more flexible for foreign business owners, especially with land ownership?
That's a great point. Investing in specific industrial zones or special economic zones might give you better ownership options. It's worth looking into if your business fits into a category that's allowed in these zones. The rules and incentives can be different, so again, doing your research and getting expert advice is really important.
Okay, so we've talked about how to have a physical place for your business in Thailand. But what about the people working there? The articles were pretty clear that foreigners need work permits to legally work in Thailand. That seems simple enough, but what's it actually like to get one?
You're right, it's a requirement. And while it might seem simple, there are definitely some things to know. First off, you need to have the right type of visa before you even apply for the work permit. It has to be a visa that specifically lets you work in Thailand, like the Smart Visa S we talked about earlier.
So you can't just come in on a tourist visa and try to work. Those days are over.
Right.
What kind of documents and information do you need to have ready once you have the right visa?
The usual stuff: your passport, a signed employment contract from your Thai company, references, and maybe education or professional qualifications depending on the job. It's important to know that the work permit is connected to a specific employer and job. So if you change companies or jobs, you'll have to apply all over again.
Ah, so it's not a general permission to work for anyone in Thailand. It's specifically for your employer and job. How long is a work permit good for?
They're usually valid for 1 year, but the good news is you can renew them every year as long as you still meet all the requirements.
Okay, so we've covered company structures, visas, work permits, and even land ownership. Starting a business in Thailand is a lot to think about, but even with all these details, it still seems like there's a lot of possibility, right?
Totally. I think it's really cool how Thailand is becoming a center for entrepreneurs and innovation. They're actively trying to attract foreign investment and talented people, which creates a dynamic and potentially rewarding environment for those willing to put in the effort.
It's like they're saying, come on in, the water's great. But like with any new business venture, it's about taking calculated risks and making smart choices. The more you understand about doing business in Thailand, the better prepared you'll be.
Exactly. And that's where we come in, trying to break down all this complicated stuff and help you decide if this is the right move for you.
Well said. We've covered a lot, but there's one crucial thing we haven't talked about yet: the culture. Doing business in Thailand isn't just about paperwork and rules. It's also about understanding the culture, the customs, and the things that aren't said out loud. We want to make sure you not only succeed, but really fit in. So up next, we're going to dive into the world of Thai business etiquette and all those cultural differences. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about all the practical stuff of starting a business in Thailand.
Yeah.
You know, the regulations, the visas, the costs. But like any seasoned traveler will tell you, the real journey is often about navigating a new culture. And in Thailand, business and culture are kind of inseparable.
That's so true. The articles really stress that being culturally sensitive isn't just a nice thing to do, it's super important for building trust and relationships and ultimately succeeding in Thai business.
Okay, so no pressure then. But seriously, where do we even start? What are some of the key cultural things that could make or break a deal in Thailand?
Well, one of the most basic concepts is the idea of face. It's about maintaining respect, avoiding conflict, and preserving harmony in all your interactions.
Right.
And this can influence things like communication styles to how you negotiate.
I've heard of saving face, but I have to admit it's always been a bit vague for me. Can you give us some real examples of how it works in business?
Sure. Like directly criticizing someone, especially in public, can be seen as a major loss of face. So instead of just saying no to proposal, a Thai business person might use less direct language or find a subtler way to say what they're thinking.
So it's kind of like reading between the lines and being aware of how your words might come across even when you have good intentions.
Exactly. And it's about knowing that relationships are really important in Thai business. Building trust takes time, and it's often a crucial step before any serious business talks happen.
One article even said that who you know can be just as important as what you know in Thailand. It talked about the importance of personal connections and networks.
That's a great point. Networking is key. Introductions from people you trust can open doors and smooth things out in negotiations much better than cold calls or random emails.
So it's not just about having a fantastic presentation and hoping everyone loves it. You really need to cultivate those relationships and build your network.
Yeah, absolutely. Going to industry events, getting introduced by people you both know, and taking the time to make real connections. These are all really important for succeeding in Thailand.
All right, so we're starting to get this relationship thing. But what about just everyday etiquette? Any cultural norms or customs that we should be extra careful about, things that might trip us up without us even knowing it?
Oh, for sure. Respect for elders and authority is really important in Thai culture. Things like pointing your feet at someone or touching their head are considered rude. And when giving or receiving business cards, always use both hands. It's a sign of respect.
Oh, interesting. So it's about paying attention to your body language and those little cues. Even small gestures can mean a lot.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of gestures, you'll see the traditional Thai greeting the way a lot. It's where you press your palms together like you're praying and slightly bow your head.
I've seen that. It's beautiful. I have to practice my way before I go.
Yeah.
What about gift giving? Is that common in Thai business?
Yes, gift giving is often a way to show good intentions and strengthen relationships, but there are some rules. It's polite to give and receive gifts with both hands, and it's also polite to refuse a gift a few times before you accept it.
Okay, I'll remember that. Don't force gifts on anyone or refuse too strongly. So there's clearly a lot to learn and a lot to be aware of. It's not just about showing up with a great business plan and expecting everything to work out perfectly.
Exactly. Cultural sensitivity is super important when doing business in Thailand. It's about being respectful, building trust, and adapting to a different way of doing things. And that's where the real adventure is.
Totally agree. It's about being open to new things, stepping outside your comfort zone, and being curious and respectful towards this new culture.
Well said. It's worth remembering that while we've hopefully given you some helpful information, it's really just the beginning. The more you learn and experience the culture, the better prepared you'll be.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, what's the one piece of advice you'd give our listeners?
If I had to pick one thing, it would be to be open and willing to learn. Don't be afraid to ask questions, get advice from people with experience, and most importantly, embrace the challenges and rewards that Thailand has to offer.
That's great advice. It's not just about building a business, but expanding your horizons and really diving into a vibrant culture.
Exactly.
And who knows, you might even discover a whole new side of yourself in the process.
Absolutely. And don't forget, as you go on this adventure, the deep dive is always here to help you. So keep sending us those questions, and we'll be here to guide you through any information challenge you come across.
To all our listeners out there, happy exploring, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.